Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming today. We're delighted to have you here. A few kind of comments before we officially start the session or the conference, the event. This is a multi-mode event. It's going to be streamed online, so welcome, hello to all of our online audience, and we also have everybody here in the room today. If you need anything, let us know. Imperial is quite an active environment, creative environment. We have a lot of kids in the room, so please be patient. Without further ado, I do want to introduce our very first speaker, who's actually going to introduce the event, our very dear Allan, who is Chairman of Imperial College Council and Chairman of TESCO, and is just such a pleasure to work with. So please welcome John.
Leila, thank you. Well, I'd like to add my welcome to everyone who's here today and everyone who's also tuned in online. This is a really important and very, very relevant event, I think. I think we're all proud, I'm certainly particularly proud, to stand together here showing our solidarity with Ukraine. The Ukrainian crisis, stemming from Russia's unjustified and inhumane invasion of Ukraine, has seen hardship and suffering on a level that most of us thought, certainly in Europe, we'd never see again. You know, millions of people have been displaced from their homes, tens of thousands of people, civilians, have been killed or seriously injured. All sorts of atrocities, I think, have been perpetrated upon Ukrainian civilians. Tens of thousands of people in the military on both sides of this conflict have lost their lives or been seriously wounded. And, you know, this is, you know, a terrible situation for us to have got into. But I think it's very clear what, and more particularly who, has caused it. So, you know, we have this huge refugee crisis now because of the, you know, I don't know, the last count, 6 million, 7 million or whatever it is, Ukrainian citizens who've been displaced, who've crossed borders, and are now trying to find temporary or perhaps more permanent homes elsewhere. Now at Imperial, we believe our role is to identify and offer solutions to today's global challenges. Some of them are long-term challenges, public health or whatever, and to use our expertise and reach to benefit those most in need and to support others in doing the same. We've launched a range of initiatives, including for this particular crisis, a new sanctuary scholarship fund where we've raised over £250,000 to support students from displaced communities such as asylum seekers and refugees. And frankly, more would be very welcome. If any of you feel you'd like to lighten your pockets, your wallets or your bank accounts after this session, you know, we can help you do so. We've developed a guide to supporting community leaders looking after those who have escaped the conflict, following on a very successful project which Mary has led in northern France. And we're trying to provide immediate support to our own community and all of our students and staff who've been affected and impacted by this war. And today we're proud to sponsor this event with Alliance for Ukraine and Solidarity Ukraine to bring together stakeholders from a broad cross-section of society, including our Ukrainian friends, and I'd like to extend a special welcome to those from the Ukrainian Embassy, leaders of NGOs. You'll hear from the LondonFirst CEO, Dickie, from the UK Red Cross and from Solidarity Ukraine, business leaders, academics, and of course our own Imperial community, staff and students and their families. And it's actually great to see so many children here this afternoon. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who are joining through our live streaming. We're delighted to have you with us today. So on behalf of Imperial, welcome to this event, welcome to Imperial. Please come back again to other events that we run. You'll always be welcome. And I'd now like to introduce, you've seen her already, Leila Guerra, Vice Dean of Education at the Imperial Business School, who will introduce our program for today. Leila.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John. So when we were organizing this day, and I do want to start right from the beginning by saying that this was an amazing and inspiring idea from our very own Mary Meany, who's over there. We were thinking, what could we do? And this links to what Lighthouse Ukraine is all about. It's about raising awareness. It's about bringing light and communication so that we all know what is happening in the situation right now with Ukraine. It's raising awareness of what's happening to those families that John just mentioned, and also reflecting on what we all can do. And for Imperial and for everybody that worked here, it was clear that we could do things institutionally, and some examples have been mentioned. But it also was a question about what we could do personally. And we all have our hands to play. So what we want to do today, and thanks to Lighthouse Ukraine, is bringing the London chapter of this awareness, solidarity, and support to Ukraine. This is not our only event. Actually, Lighthouse Ukraine is organizing events all over the world. They have been organized in Stanford, Berlin, Frankfurt, other places around the world, Oxford very recently. And we will see more of those Lighthouse events organized by universities, by companies around the world. And hopefully it will help us to unify our voices and to make sure that we all can make them heard. So today, you have the audience, the agenda here. You can see that we're bringing in a very large number of different opinions, different voices. We're going to start with a video from Philip, the CEO of Alliance for Ukraine. We have Professor Andrei Kirilenko here, who's going to actually share his own testimony of how he has experienced it. We're going to have a minute of silence to think about everybody that has lost their lives and also everybody that has impacted by this situation. We're going to have the Association of Ukrainians, LondonFirst, SolidarityUkraine. I mentioned Mary, of course. We're also going to hear about our own faculty members and Psychologists of the World for Ukraine. So we hopefully will share with you many testimonies, many experiences, many different voices. And then we'll also have time to reflect on them afterwards. So with no further ado, I now want to introduce, and after closing Francesco, sorry, I forgot my own dean. He's now going to say. So I want to start now with a very short video from Philip, CEO of Alliance for Ukraine, that will give us his own welcome.
Hello everyone in London. My name is Philip. I'm founder of Project Together, and on the second day of the war we started the Alliance for Ukraine. In the Alliance for Ukraine, over 500 organizations from public sector, NGOs and business joined together to coordinate their efforts. They came together now for the last 10 weeks, 3 times a week. They joined together financial resources, they joined together for cooperation to help in finding housing, in finding childcare, in finding jobs, in finding all the necessary needs for refugees from the Ukraine. And because we realized that bringing together all the different services, all the different help at one place, we started Lighthouse Ukraine. The first Lighthouse Ukraine happened on the April 10th here in Berlin. And we thought maybe 200, 300 people will show up. 10,000 people came together on this one day, 7,000 Ukrainians. And we realized it's not only about bringing together all those services and help. It's about really showing collectively solidarity. Solidarity with the Ukrainians. Because we are in a very special way connected to our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. Because their battle is our battle. Their strive for democracy is our strive for democracy. And their battle against autocracy, in real terms, it's also our own battle against autocracy. So we are inherently connected of what everything is happening in Ukraine. And this is why it's so important that we show our solidarity, that we do not sit back, but we proactively never stop saying on which values we believe. And this is why it's wonderful to see how Lighthouse is spreading around Europe, but even around the globe. Not only in Berlin, but in Frankfurt, in Barcelona, in Stanford, and today in London, Lighthouse is happening in very different ways. But it's in all the cities it already happened. It's connected in one thing. People come together, no matter where they're from. They come together, and they come together in showing that democracy is the strongest system we have, because it starts with the personal decision not to sit back but be proactive. And I think this is because democracy is not about possessing it. It's not a status, but it's a verb. It's an active activity. And this is why I'm so thankful that Mary Meany organize this Lighthouse event because we can show that democracy is always stronger than autocracy. And we can organize together to organize the best help we all can give to the Ukraine in this special time. So I think today is the beginning of a journey. I hope you can connect and you can create meaningful partnerships in the name of the democracy. So thank you so much, and I hope to hear and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Philip, for those very inspiring words. So we talked about democracy, we talked about values, we talked about bringing light, but we also need to talk about impact on everybody, impact particularly on those that are in Ukraine. And so with that, I do want to welcome now our very dear colleague, who used to be here at Imperial, is now at Cambridge, Professor Andrei Kirilenko. I think, if that's all right with you. Yeah, is that okay?
In front of these mics. Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. Thank you for organizing this event. This is a wonderful event. It's great to be back here. I taught in this very auditorium. We held conferences here in this auditorium. So it's now we're using it to really teach each other about what we're about. I teach finance, I teach digital technologies and regulation. And all of those things really underneath them have something about freedom. Digital technologies give you freedom to do what you want to do, communicate with others without anyone at any time, whenever you feel like it. Finance gives you freedom to invest, to start your companies, to do things collectively that otherwise you would not be able to do. Regulation is there to make sure that if you've started something and you moved along the way, that it stays yours and it could be shared with the broader public. I teach that. It may sound there's a lot of math in it and the coding, but it really underneath it is about values. I was born in Mariupol. My 85-year-old invalid mother died there during the siege. I last spoke with her a few days into the invasion. Her phone battery was dying. We were using technology. She was using her mobile phone, but the power was already out. And she was saying goodbye. She said that my life started in poverty and it ends in war. And then she asked me about my son, her grandson, who is college bound, who is going to be a college student and study and be the next generation. So I thank you all for bringing your kids in here today. First of all, they will see what the school is, what it is about, that it's not scary, that it is nice. And second, they are the future. That's what we need to think of. The maternity ward that you may have seen about that was bombed out was the maternity ward in which I was born. They killed unborn kids in there with the airstrike. So all the way from unborn babies to my 85-year-old mother is being exterminated. Why? Why? What are they doing? Can we understand it? It's hard for us with our values, with what we do, to understand, to comprehend what this is about. We also witness the amazing heroism of people. These are ordinary people. They're heroes now to us by what they've done and what they have been doing, fighting all the way down to the last place where they could fight from. That factory, Azovstal, I spent my last summer before college working there. I worked with the people who are probably very similar, who are the people who are now defending it down to the last man. They did not stop fighting. They were told by the Ukrainian High Command to evacuate. They were given an explicit order to evacuate. These are people who are showing heroism now in our everyday life. So during these times, let's remember that what we're doing here is acknowledging that we might be living in the 21st century with the technology, with communication, with finance, with very, very sophisticated things that we know and we teach, and we're moving the world forward, but it all rests on our values. And I thank you all here today. You're here because your values are on the right side. This is Saturday afternoon, and you're here, and you're bringing your kids, and you stand witness, and you stand with Ukraine. Thank you so very much.
We want to unify our voices, but we also want to be together in silence. So please allow me to introduce and welcome Irina. And join us for a minute of silence. Irina?
Thank you, Andrei, for your moving testimonial. My name is Irina Kirilenko. I work in Ukraine Embassy in Paris. I'm also the chair of Écoute Ukraine Association, which provides psychological helps for Ukrainian in France. On behalf of Ukrainians in Ukraine and across Europe, I would like to thank you for your witness and for your support. I also would like, please, to join me for a minute of silence to honor all the victims of this war. So please join me for this minute of silence. Thank you.
If I can now ask Hania Dickie for the Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain to share with us what they are doing to support the communities impacted. Hania, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us, the Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain, to come and tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing. Some of you who maybe have heard of us before understand that we actually work with Ukrainian refugees, helping welcome them to this country and basically helping with humanitarian aid in Ukraine. But I think probably a lot of you may well be surprised that the Association of Ukrainians actually has been helping Ukrainian refugees since 1946. Let's see, next. The association was actually founded in 1946 by Ukrainians who were serving both in the Canadian forces and also the Polish armed forces, and who were basically working with the British Army as part of the Second World War effort. After the war, they realized that there were a lot of Ukrainian refugees coming over from Germany and from other areas who had been displaced, and they set up an organization called the Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain. And in fact, they were originally based in Sussex Gardens, next to St James's Church. And in fact, last year, St James's Church, as a fantastic memento of the work of those people after the Second World War with refugees, installed a wonderful stained glass window in the church, which features a lovely sunflower and the Ukrainian national emblem, the trizub. So if anyone happens to be passing St James's, do go and have a look at that window. The first members were displaced persons who were often had been taken as Ostarbeiter by the Nazis, and also prisoners of war who'd been in the British prisoner of war camp in Rimini. And this was in effect a political refugee emigration, and that is why the organisation has been very strong and stable, and they've basically organised a life for themselves in this country. The key objects of the association are many and varied. To promote and support the interests of the Ukrainian community and those of Ukrainian descent, such as myself. I'm actually a daughter of 2 of those refugees who originally came. To foster and advance Ukrainian knowledge, culture and arts. We all know Ukraine was rather a hidden nation previously, often only known when it was the Euros or Eurovision, but very many people didn't really know where Ukraine was or who Ukrainians were. And now the third objective really coming into its own, to provide advice, welfare and assistance to those suffering hardship, including those in Ukraine. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the work that we're doing there. And also, most importantly, one of the last objectives, to promote and support the development and freedom and democracy, human rights in Ukraine, and support Ukraine's territorial integrity and continued existence as an independent state. And that's of imperative importance at the moment. So just in terms of our organisational structure, we're governed by a board of directors, and under that are 25 or so branches. We're actually creating new branches as I'm standing here, and our head office is located in Linden Gardens. An important asset that we have, apart from the community buildings that have been, a linchpin in this current war, is our Shavchenko Library and Archive. And this is the largest collection of diaspora publications in Europe, and very much documenting the refugee story after the Second War coming through to today. So what have we been doing so far? We work to promote our heritage and history outside of the Ukrainian community to make sure people understand Ukraine, its culture and so on. Since 2018, we've actually funded and organised a Holodomor Essay Prize for Year 12 students. For those of you that may not have heard of Holodomor, the forced genocide famine that was enforced on Ukraine by Stalin in 1932-33. This isn't really in the school curriculum. How could we get a bigger understanding and awareness of this Holodomor in Ukraine into the school system? And we've been doing this very successful essay prize for sixth form students for the past number of years. We also maintain close links and try to lobby MPs and councils for a positive image of Ukraine, to make sure that we are an integral part of the community. And most importantly, probably today, we also support supplementary Saturday schools in London and other places around the country. And I'll tell you a little bit about their work in a moment. Very important work to help the current refugee crisis. So, since the start of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, 24th of February, what has our organisation been doing? Well, we knew before that date that something was going to happen in Ukraine. So we had already started up a crowdfunder in preparation. When we were organising this, we thought, what should we put as the target? Well, maybe 20,000, or I don't know, let's put it at 50,000. We might just scrape that. To date, we have collected nearly £3 million for humanitarian aid, helping humanitarian charities in Ukraine. AICM, who provides medical supplies, Caritas, and Red Cross Ukrainian Society. We've been overwhelmed by the support that the British people have given. Because we'd prepared, in effect, we were the only crowdfunder available on GoFundMe. People were looking, where could they donate? And we were there ready. So I have to actually thank the foresight of our other board members who instigated this and really thought about this in advance. We've provided our community centres. We have around about 25 community centres around the country, and they have really been the linchpin. Ukrainians who maybe didn't know we existed have found those centres and started to work on gathering humanitarian aid. Those of you who know Ukrainians know that they're great self-organisers. Two revolutions, the Orange Revolution and the Revolution of Dignity, very much has shown this. Wherever there's a Ukrainian with a cause, there's a tent city. And in fact, we've got a tent outside our community centre in Holland Park. So those volunteers have done a fantastic job. Some of them have suspended their own jobs. They've taken sabbaticals. They've given up work to work for that humanitarian aid and for refugees in Ukraine. Latterly, we've also worked with our Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral to set up a more established Ukrainian Welcome Centre, which will provide guidance and advice for Ukrainians coming to this country as a result of the war in Ukraine. So basically, the fact that we've been helping refugees for 75 years has enabled us to have that stable foundation to continue the work in this country. The 25 branches you can see spread around the country, they are also doing their bit. Several articulated lorries of humanitarian aid have been collected. They've started free shops where refugees under the different visa schemes can come, get goods, food banks, clothes, and so on. But most importantly is to ensure that those people coming from Ukraine can connect and stay connected with their Ukrainian culture and roots, be able to speak Ukrainian for their children, to be able to take part in cultural events. And that is imperative that that work is continued. And finally, a little bit about the supplementary schools, and I have to take my hat off to our headmistress for the London St Mary's Ukrainian School and the head of the Parents Association, who have basically been working their fingers to the bone to help these displaced children who have come. So there was a regular Saturday school. We had maybe 100 pupils, and we thought that was big. In the past few weeks, displaced children have been welcomed to our school. The teachers, the head, and the parents' committee have worked to set up holiday clubs for those children and to make sure that the trauma that they've suffered in arriving in this country is somehow softened with understanding and care. So thank you very much for standing with Ukraine, and thank you very much for listening to our work. Thanks.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you, Anya, for sharing such an inspiring work. It's amazing everything that you've achieved. Now, we know that in the last weeks, all over Europe, here in the UK, companies are rallying to see how they can support, what they can do. And so with that, it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome John Dickie here on stage, CEO of LondonFirst, who will share with us what they have been doing and what they have been contributing to. John?
Thank you very much, Leila, Mary, and everybody here who's made this event at Imperial this afternoon possible. As Leila's just said, I'm John Dickie. I'm the Chief Executive of LondonFirst, and we are the capital's campaigning business group. We represent about 170 of the most engaged businesses, the largest businesses in the capital, including some of London's principal universities and including Imperial, which is one of our members. Our board met shortly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and while the subject was not on the agenda, it entirely dominated the evening's discussion. And our chairman, Paul Dressler, is here, which is a testament to the importance with which the board takes our role in doing all we can to help in this crisis. I've never seen business leaders as determined to do something as our board was that night. Their first concern, of course, was for their people, and particularly those people who were under fire in Ukraine. Businesses, along with civil society and government, as we've heard, moved very swiftly to mobilize immediate aid for refugees, the millions of refugees in the neighboring countries to Ukraine, but also for the millions of displaced people in Ukraine. And across the UK, in a matter of days, more than 100,000 people said they would take Ukrainian refugees into their homes. So we concluded that night that the most effective thing London business could do to help was to provide Ukrainian refugees with jobs. For while the first priority is, of course, safety, opportunity and hope follow closely behind. We know just how much difference it makes when coming to a new place to re-establish life through work, and London has many jobs across the whole economy that business is keen to welcome Ukrainian refugees into. LondonFirst is leading this response by bringing together those businesses that can pledge jobs, by connecting businesses with refugee employment specialists, and in a few cases, directly connecting refugees with our member companies. Scaling up this process is proving a slow slog. There is not yet the planned sponsorship route directly for business, though we are working with government on its pilot, which is looking at bringing together those businesses that can provide jobs at scale together with accommodation. And we are told that the direct sponsorship route will be open in weeks rather than months. Throughout this time, we have also brought together some of the key stakeholders in London and beyond to plan the practicalities for the medium term. For example, how we fund and provide some of the essential support services, education, health, housing, that we know refugees need, and which recent history, I'm afraid, tells us we've not been as good at providing for such communities as we need to be. The British government has provided strong moral and practical support over the past 3 months to the Ukrainian government. I will let you judge whether delivery has matched rhetoric in terms of visa processing and provision. But across the country now, business is responding, providing jobs and practical help today. And we are doing all that we can to secure the systems and support that will enable us to deliver at scale. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing those examples with us and for letting us know everything that's happening. And we know it has impact. We know it has impact on many families that have been impacted by this, that are suffering the consequences. And we wanted to also have the opportunity today to share with you direct examples, things that are actually happening right now. And for that, it gives me enormous pleasure to bring here on stage Mary Meany, who's Imperial College Council member, Imperial College Advisory member as well, but more importantly, who has inspired every single person in this community, in this building, to make more, to impact more, to support more. And she's done that with her family, and I'm very, very grateful for her for all the work she's done for us. And please, Mary.
Thank you so much, Layla. With that kind of introduction, I think it's only downhill from here on in. I'm really thrilled to be with all of you today. And as Layla said, I wanted to share a little bit of what we've been trying to do only 110 miles from where I stand right now, and share some of the examples, some of the stories, some of the insights, some of the learnings. Like all of you, when I saw the war, the invasion, what was happening, I could not believe my eyes. I couldn't believe this was happening in my lifetime. I couldn't believe this was happening on our watch. And like all of you, I wanted to do something. I live in northern France, and I had worked in Kiev with some amazing Ukrainians, and I immediately reached out to them and said, look, we have a big place. We'd be delighted to have you come and stay with us. And one thing quickly led to another. And very quickly, I learned about an incredible Ukrainian woman by the name of Anna. She had given birth literally as the war was breaking out. And after she had given birth, after she had gotten out of the hospital, she went home and she said goodbye to her husband and her country and started making her way to the border. And as she got to the border, the lines were incredibly long. It also happened to be -6 degrees centigrade. And she was there with her newborn child. And I was watching her progress as she started to go from Kiev towards the frontier, towards the border. And she was struggling, as you can imagine. And so the first thing that we organized was very simple. It was our 9-seater that we filled with medical supplies and equipment and clothes. And a good friend of ours, a Ukrainian student who's 24 years old, took the car and drove to the border. And she picked up Anna and her newborn child and a couple of other families and brought her back. But in the meantime, another family arrived, a family of Irina, the grandmother who's in the middle, her daughter and granddaughter, Maria, who's 8 months old, and 11 orphans, some absolutely remarkable people. They live in a village near Kiev. The train ride from their village to the border should normally take 12 hours, but it took 54 because of the bombings. They had to stop and wait for 7 hours a stretch while the Russian jets flew over them and fired at them. The 11 orphans are truly amazing. One of them plays the piano beautifully, but he's never actually taken a class. Another one, Sergei, the taller one with my son, always greets you with an enormous smile and always asks you what he can do to help. He comes and cleans out the chickens every morning with my son so we can get some more eggs. And there's Lisa with the flowers, again with one of my daughters, who created bouquets for the groups of Ukrainian women and children who would be arriving in the next stretch. And then, of course, we have the buses that we organized. Now, this is not a photo that I've taken. It's one I took from the internet with permission, because we don't allow the press when the buses arrive. And we tell the French politicians that they're welcome to come if they are a host family or if they're bringing donations. But the last thing these people need are long and boring speeches in a language they don't understand. What they need is a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Chai is very important. Something to eat. And then they need to be matched into a host family that will care for them, that will provide them the support and the food, the baby equipment, the medical care, the computer so that they can link into psychologists, the schooling and the French classes that they need. But when the buses go back, we make sure that they go back full. We make sure that they go back stocked with medical supplies and first aid equipment, baby equipment and Pampers and hygiene and clothes and durable food. But we make sure that they go back absolutely full, that everything is in carefully packed boxes that are labeled in French and Polish and Ukrainian so they can go exactly to where they're needed most. And we have some truly remarkable families. We have almost 400 now with us, 400 Ukrainian women and children primarily. This is Elena. She came with her husband Bogdan and 5 of their 6 children. The oldest son stayed in Kiev to fight for his country. Bogdan, the father, has Crohn's disease. He also has polyarthritis, so he can barely walk. Elena, who you see in this picture, has cancer. And she should have been operated on in Kiev, but the war broke out. And so she left her country with 5 of her 6 children And when she arrived, we of course immediately took her to the doctor. And so I was in the doctor's office with my friend Pavel, and I was translating from the French doctor into English to Pavel, who was translating into Russian to Bogdan and Elena, who were then responding back. And as we were leaving, the doctor said, please, for the Crohn's disease, the polyarthritis, the cancer, you need to avoid stress. But their country is at war, their home has been destroyed, and their oldest son is fighting on the front. This is Alira, their youngest, who's absolutely wonderful. And what we saw was a remarkable show of solidarity and support. So I live in a little village of about 1,100 people, and I have 4 barns that are absolutely overflowing. Literally within hours of word getting out that we wanted to do something, people started dropping by with donations. Our local farmer, who's our neighbor, wrote me a text and said, Mary, my house isn't very big. I don't have that much room, so I can't host a family. But I have cows. I'll give you milk. And so he comes by twice a week to bring us milk. The other farmers bring us potatoes and vegetables. The boulangerie brings us bread 3 times a week. And so one of my barns is overflowing with food. A second barn is overflowing with clothing. A third barn is overflowing with toys and medical equipment. We've seen extraordinary support from the village, including the mayor, who basically came and plowed up the back garden so that we could plant vegetables, so we'd have more food, because we can feed a village with the back garden. And we try to provide medical care. So you see the Red Cross that arrives is on hand when the buses arrive, because you can pretty much guarantee that all the children will be sick, and they'll need something. They'll need some care that first night. You can see the nurses to the right. We did a comprehensive medical day where we had doctors and nurses and psychologists and translators to make sure that we understood the vaccination status and chronic conditions and psychological care. I thought it was wonderful that the nurses came wearing the Ukrainian colors. And as you'll hear later, there is a lot of trauma. We had one woman arrive on a Sunday. The following day, she learned that her husband had been killed. And she refused to believe it until people back in Ukraine sent her pictures showing her that unfortunately it was true. We even arranged transport, and this shows you what can happen when people really have the will to do it. So our local mayor, who's absolutely marvelous, managed to get us a bus stop right in front of our farm, which happens to be the Ukrainian Welcome Center in our part of the world, within less than 24 hours. So it's a great example of what can happen when the actions match the rhetoric. And of course, we do a lot of therapy by play, a lot of therapy by animals. This is one of our neighbors who came by with Shetland ponies to join our son, who has lots of chickens and guinea fowl and guinea pigs and rabbits and you name it. And we do a lot of art therapy, and we try to create activities that can help, yes, bring a little bit of joy and a little bit of happiness. For the teenagers, we found that the 2 things that worked best was first the free computers that were generously donated by a large number of different organizations. And I remember unloading these computers and putting them on a table. And shortly afterwards, seeing that all the teenagers were starting to gravitate towards that table and just looking at the table, but they didn't dare touch anything. They were just bending over, looking at the table. And then I finally opened one of the computers and turned it on and said, go, have a go at it. And then you could just see these enormous smiles. The second set of enormous smiles came with the pizza therapy, which was also very important. And then we found that the rest of our village started to come in. And so this is actually the local football club, or I should say soccer club, where our chauffeurs decided that they were going to use the 4 minibuses they had to go back to Poland and to bring more people back, especially the most vulnerable, the people who really needed slightly more convenient ways of coming in. Our oldest guest, by the way, is 94 years old. He, absolutely extraordinary character. He actually walked across the border from Ukraine into Poland and then got the bus and the train and various other things to come to us. He's a former law professor. He plays chess, and he beats everyone he plays at chess. He's absolutely amazing. The ladies in the village have adopted him, and so they come and they bring meringues, and he sings the Marseillaise in perfect French. So these are our bus drivers. The oldest among the crew is 74 years old. It's a 19-hour trip from Warsaw to where we live in northern France. And so they went, and then they returned with another set of displaced people. And it has been a bit of a roller coaster, but I think it's important that we recognize what they've gone through. This is a note that came on a day when I was in one of my lowest points, and everything seemed to have gone wrong, including the kitchen catching on fire, which is another story I won't bore you with. But the 8 people who were living in my home, they came down having just arrived, having taken that all-night bus, having taken a nap, and they gave me the following note, which says, "Dear Mary, we thank you for accepting us. As we traveled to you, Kiev very hard. They calmly kill adults and small people. They bomb houses, apartments. Our train was fired on the road. Thank God everyone remained alive. We were forced to leave Ukraine for this war. Before the war, we lived well. We had work, apartments, a home. Now we're left with nothing. We believe that Ukraine will win this war, and we will return to our beloved homeland. We're ready to help you around the house, cook and clean. Just tell us what to do. We don't want to sit idle." Diana, Oleg, Rosa, Tamara, and Tatmina. Some remarkable people. And we're starting to see the transformation as people start to get settled in and start to recover from some of the trauma. So the children who used to wake up screaming every night, we now see the first smiles. We now see laughter. We now see games. We see the French kids and the Ukrainian kids playing together, and it's quite remarkable to see the joy. We're also engaging some of the children locally. So as we send back the buses full of medical care and medical supplies and food and clothing and so on, we also send little care packages, including drawings from the French children. So you see this is from Clément, who's in a class with my youngest daughter, Lucy. He's got his beret and his baguette. They actually don't look like this all the time, I promise. But it was a lovely thought and a lovely drawing, which we sent back to thank all the workers, whether they're Polish or whether they're Ukrainian, for all the things that they're doing. And I'll just close with a few final stories. This is Maria, an absolutely beautiful little girl who arrived in this last batch that just arrived very recently. Now, in that group, we had people who had left in a mini convoy of 12 cars. Only 5 of those cars made it out alive. And so you can imagine what these children have seen, what they've experienced, what they've witnessed. And Maria, when she came, she's beautiful. And we tried to give her some toys. We tried to see what we could do to help, to bring a little bit of joy. And she kept saying, no, please, no. And so we kept offering her things. And then finally we managed to find a jump rope. And she was willing to accept the jump rope. And so we gave her the jump rope. And then in Google Translate, she sent us the following message, which for those of you who may not know French, loosely translated means, "Thank you for bringing us happiness." So what have we done? Well, we're a tiny little village of about 1,100 people. But with the other villages, the other small towns around, we have almost 400, primarily women and children. And we've managed to find lodging and food and clothing and baby equipment and medical care. And thanks to Yulia, Irina and Yulia, who'll talk in just a moment, psychological support. All the kids are now in French schools. We have French language classes 4 times a week. We've arranged for transport, and we're doing driving classes and driver's ed. We found work for all of the adults who are able to work. And now we are in the process of creating a home repair and renovation company so that we're providing independent housing. We've also created a dozen of satellite communities, all the way from Dunkirk in the north to Aix in the south. And as you'll hear in a little bit, thanks to Imperial, we tried to pull everything together, all the learnings, all the insights, all the mistakes, everything we learned from those mistakes, so that we could support others. And we're trying to help other community leaders in France and elsewhere so that we can support as many Ukrainian women and children and men as we can. So you'll see in a minute the guidebook that covers just about everything you need to do before and on day 1 and the first week and the second week and so on, and what needs to happen and some of the most relevant materials. We've also publicized this on a website, which my daughter Emily created in a weekend when I don't think she slept very much. So we're trying to diffuse this and we're trying to help, because ultimately there's a lot at stake. This is Anna's baby. Slava Ukraine. And actually, I meant to introduce Irina and Yulia and Larissa, who are going to talk to us about the extraordinary support, because these women have been absolutely instrumental to helping with all of the psychological trauma that our community has experienced. So let me please hand it over to some wonderful women.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. My name is Irina Francis Galasyuk. I live in England, in Bristol. My colleagues and I represent the community psychologists of the world for Ukraine. And it's a big honor for us to be part of the Lighthouse Ukraine. My mother was born in the small Ukrainian village of Verki in the Poltava region. She was 3 years old when the Second World War began and Nazis invaded her village. The family had 9 children. Only 3 of them, including my mother, survived the war. She rarely smiled. And she told us a lot of the war and about her childhood memories that she could not erase. At that time, nobody knew about psychological support, about psychological help. And nobody thought about the fact that people need psychological protection, which is no less important than food and shelter. Today, we psychologists know that the sooner we start working with grief and loss, the less likely there are severe somatic and mental disorders. And the more likely is that women and children who have experienced suffering and grief will be able to smile and enjoy life despite everything they have been through. Mary Mini, her family, neighbors, hosting Ukrainians in their city, were able to arrange the life of women and children. During these 2 months, they organized for them not only everything necessary for life, but also psychological assistance for everyone who needs it. I'm happy to give the floor to my daughter, Yulia Galasyuk, who is also in our team and who was the initiator of our project. Please. She will be not alone, but with my grandchild.
Yes, I would call it stars align rather in terms of initiation on my part. Ever since I met Mary, and I'm not the only one to say here that she's instrumental in a lot of things, and in particular the progress that we are making. With one of the first waves of the displaced Ukrainians, it was very clear that psychological support sometimes is overlooked. And with the first aid provided when the physical necessity is there, the psychological one is quite often invisible, and as my mom said, has consequences for the rest of your lives. So with that in mind, we started creating a community of psychologists who had specific knowledge and experience working with those with war trauma. And I apologize, it's been he's, by the way, on the best behavior right now, if people were wondering. But we started with really looking for psychologists who have extensive knowledge in this space. And we started with a small number of them, and that number is growing day by day. And we have colleagues from Europe, US, Israel, and you will shortly hear from our colleague from Ukraine, and we have a number of Ukrainians there as well. In addition to working with the Ukrainians who come to a different country to find peace and make sense out of this world, what's really important is working with hosting families who have open their homes and, more importantly, their hearts to those who they don't know in these very difficult circumstances. And again, speaking about the absolutely amazing group that Mary has organized, the very first group session that we hosted for those hosting families, when we asked them how long you're gonna have those Ukrainians for, because from the psychologist standpoint, it's really important to know what you're working with, their response was, as long as it takes. And when working with people in different languages, from completely different backgrounds, from different cultural and on so many different levels of their lives, it's challenging, but we're here together to do that. And it's been a very inspiring journey so far. One of the challenges is actually translating from Ukrainian or Russian into English and into French. And although Mary just gave us a very good example of how that Google Translate can work, some of the things that come out of the Google Translate can be actually far from what people are trying to deliver, let's put it that way, if anyone has tried ever to communicate in a foreign country using that way. So what we face in terms of challenge is not only obviously the psychological aspect of things, but also the language barrier, the cultural barrier. But I think we're getting there. In terms of the reaching out to people, I think it's no secret to anyone that in terms of psychological support to be provided and efficient, people need to realize they need it. So that's another aspect that we're also trying to put across, and we, I think, are doing really good progress from that standpoint. Ever since the first group starts and speaks at the group sessions or individual discussions, our psychologists are available 24/7, my mom included. On WhatsApp, everyone knows that they can quite quickly get help at whatever time of the day they need. And that's a huge testimony to the psychologists we have on board. And very briefly, why I'm so passionate about this. I want to say project, but it's really a lifetime piece of work for, I think, a lot of us. I'm a mother of two beautiful kids. One of them is here, the other one is at home. And I think that each kid deserves freedom and safe environment. And each parent deserves the right to do that. So we're here to help on both sides. Thank you.
The video, yes. I'm the wrong person to put on a video.
Мене звуть Сергій Дмитренко. Я психолог-волонтер організації «Психологи світу в Україні». Я перебуваю в Україні, я допомагаю людям, які покинули рідну землю і живуть у країнах по всьому світу через кляту війну. Моя сім'я теж була змушена втекти від небезпеки до Німеччини. Тому я знаю, що відбувається в сім'ях біженців не з чуток. Моя дружина виїхала з країни з дітьми та маленькими рюкзаками, в яких лежала вся їхня цінність. Кілька дитячих футболок та ноутбук. Люди, які приймають наших жінок та дітей у свої будинки, намагаються зігріти їх своїм теплом. Тепер я знаю цих людей у вічі. Я зустрічався з ними і чув, як вони переймаються жітками та дітьми, яких ніколи не бачила раніше, але з якими тепер вони живуть в одному будинку. Низький уклін цим людям в знак поваги за їхню доброту та відкриті серця. Проте слід пам'ятати, що навіть перебуваючи в безпеці, мами з дітьми опинилися без підтримки близьких, без чоловіків, батьків, старших дітей, нові правила життя, безліч оформлених документів, чужа мова. Це все стрес, це самота, багато тривоги та занепокоєння про завтрашній день, втома, просто тому, що ніхто не може змінити на цьому материнському посту. Мами та діти, з якими я працюю, чомусь схожі на мою родину, яка зараз у Німеччині. Вони всі привезли війну з собою всередині. Багато хто відчуває провину, що поїхали і хочуть швидше повернутися, незважаючи на регулярні обстріли та звуки сирен. І багато хто втомився і зривається на дітей, хоча раніше ніколи так не робили. Є діти, які прокидаються від кошмарів і здригаються від звуків літаків. А на жаль, ця війна залишиться з ними назавжди. Але ми, психологи, робимо все можливе, щоб діти та їхні мами знову, як і раніше, могли радіти життю, не дивлячись ні на що. Це те, що роблю я та мої колеги, це те, що ми робимо разом з сім'ями, які приймають українців та є вже в усіх країнах Європи. Дякую.
I will translate what Serhiy said. My name is Larissa Walker, and I'm also part of the project Psychologists of the World for Ukraine. My name is Serhiy Dmitrienko. I am a volunteer psychologist for the project Psychologists of the World for Ukraine. I'm based in Ukraine, and I help people who left their motherland to live in countries around the globe because of the damned war. My family was also forced to flee from danger to Germany. Therefore, I know firsthand what happens in refugee families. My wife left the country with children in small backpacks that contained all their valuable belongings, several children's t-shirts and laptops. People who take our women and children into their homes and try to warm them up with their warmth. Now I know these people personally. I have met them and saw how worried they are about the women and children they have never seen before, but with whom they now live in the same house. I bow to these people to express my respect for their kindness and open hearts. However, we must not forget that even being safe, mothers with children found themselves without the support of their loved ones, without their husbands, parents, older children. New rules of life, a lot of paperwork, a foreign language. It's all stressful. There is loneliness, a lot of anxiety and worries about future. And tiredness, simply because no one can replace them in their maternal roles. The mothers and children I work with are somewhat similar to my family, which is now in Germany. They all brought war with them inside. Many feel guilty that they left and want to return as soon as possible, despite the regular shelling and the sound of sirens. Many are tired and take it on their children, although they have never done this before. There are children who wake up from nightmares and startle at the sound of airplanes. Unfortunately, this war will remain with them forever, but we, psychologists, are doing everything possible so the children and their mothers can enjoy life again, despite everything that's happened to them. It's what my colleagues and I do. It's what we do together with the host families in all European countries. I will also give a closing to what we were talking about before, about the project of Psychologists of the World for Ukraine. So I joined the project that Yulia and Irina started, and we started, at that point the project was working with Mary and helping a lot of families in France. Since then, our project grew massively, and we now have inquiries from displaced people, displaced families from all over Europe, and we also have psychologists basically from all over the world, and the number is growing. And we are now working with over 300 families, and we work with them with groups and individually as well. We help with war trauma, we help with stress of moving into different country, feeling lonely, learning new language. We help with bereavement and loss, and we help with basically everything else that surrounds the times when you are in stress and you've just been through atrocities and you have to somehow continue living your life. And we will continue providing this crisis support for as long as needed, and we will continue growing the number of our psychologists and helping more and more Ukrainian displaced families. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you so much. Don't worry at all about your child. You don't even know what the children outside are doing. Francesco, I'm not going to say who it is. We've heard a lot of examples of what could be done and what has been done. And some of you might say, what can I do? And that's what happened here at Imperial. We had students, we had staff asking us, what can I do? I certainly, if I had to grow potatoes in my garden, none of us would eat. So we thought, what can we do? And one of those people that said, what can we do, was Celia, one of our professors, and Marina, one of our students who is currently studying upstairs, so she cannot join us today. Oh, is she? You told me you were studying. I just came. There we go, Marina. And together they took the car, they drove over there to Mary's house, and then they did something that hopefully will not only help in this crisis, will not only help in this war, but actually will be helping around the world in other activities and other war situations. So over to Celia. Thank you.
My son, Gideon, has decided he would also like to join me up here. So he will be with me. It's very, very hard to follow everybody that has just come before me, and I am keenly aware that it is only Francisco and I who stand in the way between this event and the cake that is outside and the beautiful sunny Saturday. And hopefully all of us will go out and enjoy the rest of this afternoon in freedom and peace and appreciate it more than we may have taken for granted a few hours ago. I want to say, I will be really quick, but I want to start by acknowledging that there's something ironically heartening about this crisis that has come on the tail end of a very exhausting global pandemic, because the way that we needed to support each other during the pandemic was to all stay apart, and the way that we need to support each other through this crisis is to all come together. And although there has been an enormous, almost infinite bounty of goodwill throughout Europe and throughout the world for Ukraine, it is not always easy to understand how best to catalyze that goodwill in action. And that is why 150 years ago, the sociologist Max Weber said that crisis is when leaders emerge. Crisis provides the opportunities for leaders to emerge. And this crisis has certainly provided an enormous amount of opportunity for leaders to emerge. I'm not sure that any of us would have been as obvious as it is now in January, the legacy of leadership that Ukraine Prime Minister Zelensky will offer history. And there's a lot of additional opportunities for leadership that this crisis has created, including many we have heard from today. So John and Hanya and Mary, who I am most intimately aware of her leadership through this crisis. What leaders do is provide routes through which that goodwill and altruistic motivation can actually become executed into real life help. So I want Marina to come down here. I first met Mary in person in International Women's Week shortly after the war had broken out. And she said, I have to go home because we're about to receive 100 people at my farm. And I said, so what can we do to help? And over the next few weeks, we were in touch. And I think that one of the things that this crisis gives us the opportunity to think about is how can all of us contribute in the best way we know how, right? So we just heard from psychologists who are contributing in the way that they can best make meaning and provide in the world. And leaders can do that by catalyzing the goodwill of others into action. And for Marina and I, we went down for a weekend, and I have promised Gideon that we will come back to Tilk and pet the bunnies and get eggs from the chickens, and also take a lot of videos so that I can use Mary as an example for teaching leadership without formal authority or reward power, which is in business schools what everyone's most thinking about. How can I be a leader if I don't have the opportunity to give promotions, advancement, and salary? And I'm going to use Mary as an example of how you can do that. So it was clear that what she was learning in rallying not only the 400 families that have arrived, but the 280 volunteers that she communicates with on a bi-weekly basis at First Daily, the 120 host families that she managed to persuade to open their doors, the 25 community leaders who are managing giant streams of work, from finding food to providing psychological support to ensuring that people get the administrative support they need and making it through the French bureaucracy, which is, no bureaucracy is easy to navigate, and especially not one when you don't speak the language. The translators that have been needed on the ground, the doctors that have needed to provide medical support as people come off buses. The transport, all of these streams of work, local leaders have emerged under Mary's leadership and been able to find the pathway through which all of that goodwill can be executed and into real help. So Irina and I spent the weekend there and codified, with Mary's help and the local leaders' help, how to do this in your own local community. And I brought an example of the hard copy of the guide that is much lighter in PDF form and navigable on the web, that Marina and Sneha and Karina, who can't be here right now, and a bunch of other business school students were able to create this guide that can be used in your local community to rally and provide the support, education, healthcare, employment, housing that the people who are being displaced and fleeing the war need at the time. It is now being used in 7 satellite communities throughout France. There's the opportunity for anyone to be able to access it and use it. And my own hope, I hope not in vain, is that the doors to UK communities that have an enormous amount of goodwill and not enough access to visas will open a little wider soon, so that the British version of the playbook that our team is now adapting this playbook to be useful for can be put to the use that it deserves. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. Thank you to all the kids for being so great and so well behaved through this. And I will turn it over to Francisco to close us out.
If you want to read the playbook, we will share with you the link. Fantastic example. And as we close the event and go over to the cake, it gives me, again, enormous pleasure to welcome our last speaker, Dean Francisco Veloso. All of this could not happen if we didn't have a dean, a president that said, absolutely, I'm going to use Gideon's T-shirt, we're done hibernating, we're done being silent. This can only happen if we all stand together, and that can only happen when we have a dean like Francisco.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As Celia was mentioning, I'm not going to take a lot of time between now and have a little bit of time for us to be informally talking. I just wanted to go back to, I think, the 3 critical, I think, they're words, but they're much more than words that we've heard today in different times, different contexts, and with different depth. The first one is peace. Of course, what brings us here is this tragic war that's, having a devastating impact in families and communities. So we're here today, first and foremost, because we all want peace. We want this to stop. We want this to end. And of course, we talked a lot about that, but that's, of course, what's always present. Sometimes we feel powerless because there's not much we can do directly at that level, at the level of, having influence on the political leaders, and certainly having influence on an autocrat that's having, driving this war. But perhaps even at that level, that's not quite true. I mean, through our actions, through these amazing actions like the Lighthouse, it keeps that pressure on, that movement, that drive to change things and to bring that peace. That is the first thing that brings us together here. The second one is solidarity. It is here, the Stand With Ukraine, the Lighthouse, the solidarity. And that comes on the flip side of the war. When it comes, and it's not just with war, it's with injustice. It's also, as we saw, with disease. Solidarity is really what we can do when we cannot avoid these types of situations because they are imposed on us by a virus or by a dictator. We can use the best in us, our humanity, to be, and to have this solidarity with others. And what we heard here today is this amazing display of this solidarity in different ways, on the psychological, on the job, on the way that we receive others, and the importance that it is. And that just makes us more human. It makes us more appreciate the human side that unfortunately the war has brought onto us, and which we saw in display amazingly well this afternoon here today. And the third and the last one is action. Because as Celia mentioned, and so importantly, it's not just about the feeling. Of course, we do feel the solidarity. We do feel the importance of helping and supporting us in our communities, and especially when we feel connected. You heard, many examples here today of people that are from Ukraine or had connections. As Mary mentioned, the immediate impact because of the persons that there, and we heard here today Andrei, who was our professor for many years. And now I immediately, when I felt this war, I remembered Andrei. And of course the fact that he directly, and in the previous school that I was in, I had another professor from Ukraine, and immediately he was telling me exactly about how that. So we have that feeling that comes and overpowers us. But what is important is to drive that to action, to make a difference, to try, to help others. And that's the third and very important element that brought us here today, is that what we saw through all these testimonies here is that we can make a difference in small, in very large ways, on the jobs, on the psychological, on the way that we receive others. We can and should make a difference. And so the last pledge is just a pledge for this action, to take this very unfortunate situation, to, channel this sense of solidarity that we have, and to really drive action and make a difference with them. So I'd like to thank all of you for coming here tonight, this afternoon, but more importantly, beyond today, which is just a gathering, really to thank all of you that spoke here and many others for all that you're doing, to support these communities, to try to drive peace, but hopefully to make a difference. And of course, this won't stop until the war stops, and so that goes back to where it is. So Mary, Celia, Leila, John, Irina, Julia, and many others that, were spoken here, Andrei, that thank you very much for coming here, for contributing, and we're going to have a video, but we're also inviting you to stay outside and share a little bit more, learn a little bit more, and understand how we can continue to make a difference. Thank you. You want to take a picture? And where?
After the video.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you shortly.
Мене звати Олександра Біннерт, я з Альянсу українських організацій з Берліну, де ми вже вдруге будемо робити «Маяк Україна». Маяк є для нас символом людяності, символом свободи. І сьогодні я хочу сказати, я знаю, що ми всі втомилися, що війна йде вже давно, вона йде вже з 2014 року, і вона жахлива, але ми переможемо, ми обов'язково переможемо, тому що це наша земля. Trimajmy się. Slava Ukraini!
Ich bin Isa Sonnenfeld und gehöre als Privatperson zum Orga-Team von Leuchtturm Ukraine in Berlin. Leuchtturm Ukraine bedeutet für uns als Bündnis ukrainischer und deutscher Organisationen und der vielen NGOs, dass wir einen Ort für direkte Hilfe und Orientierung schaffen möchten. Wir möchten ein Zeichen setzen gegen den Angriffskrieg Russlands in der Ukraine, gegen alle Kriege und ein Zeichen für Menschlichkeit und Begegnung auf Augenhöhe. Und wir möchten ukrainischen Stimmen einen Raum geben. Leuchtturm Ukraine soll Licht geben, Orientierung und direkte Hilfe spenden. Für die Zukunft hoffen wir, dass Solidarität, Menschlichkeit und Begegnung gewinnen werden. Und an alle Leuchtturmstädte, gemeinsam können wir ungeahnte Kräfte der Solidarität entfalten lassen.
Hallo, wir sind United for Ukraine Bildungsprofis und
Europecast
aus Frankfurt.
Von dem Leuchtturm in Frankfurt am Main hoffen wir uns, dass viele Ukrainerinnen von den zahlreichen Hilfsangeboten, die es hier in Frankfurt am Main gibt, profitieren können und die Hilfe bekommen können, die sie dringend benötigen.
Wir bleiben zusammen. Wir halten zusammen gegen die russische Aggression und das Licht des Leuchtturms wird nicht erlöschen.
Я Поліна від асоціації United for Ukraine. Маяк Україна у Франкфурті для нас можливість надати допомогу тим, кому вона зараз крайне необхідна. 8 травня є також Днем Матері, і ми хочемо, щоб цей день став особливий для них.
Hallo, ich bin aus Essen. Wir hoffen in der Zukunft auf ein Hand in Hand mit allen Menschen, denn jeder kann etwas beitragen. Von finanzieller Unterstützung bis Räumlichkeiten sind oder Equipment, wir alle können etwas beitragen, sodass ukrainische geflüchtete Menschen hier in Deutschland bei uns eine zweite Heimat finden können. Und in anderen Leuchtturmstädten wünschen wir viel Kraft. Denkt dran, ihr seid nicht alleine, sonst lasst uns gegenseitig besuchen und ein wenig die Akkus auftanken.
Hallo allerseits. Wir sind in Saarbrücken und am 8. Mai sind wir Teil der internationalen Aktion Picknick an langen Tischen. Im Rahmen dieser Aktion vereinen wir uns hier in Saarbrücken zusammen mit allen Ehrenamtlichen, die Lust haben, die Ukraine zu unterstützen und die Ukrainer und Ukrainerinnen, die hier im Saarland ihre Zuflucht gefunden haben. Vereinen und vernetzen wir uns, denn zusammen sind wir stark. Ehren der Ukraine. Es lebe Europa.
Привіт всім! Ми знаходимося в Сарбрюкені. 8 травня ми приєднуємося до міжнародної акції та проводимо пікнік за довгими столами на Тбіліській площі. Наша мета – залучити якомога більше волонтерів для організації роботи з допомогою Україні та українцям, які прибули до землі зараз. Приєднуйтесь разом у силу. Слава Україні!
Hello from Barcelona. Hola des de Barcelona. Salutacions des de l'Escola Frederic Mistral Tècnica Eulàlia. Estem molt agraïts de poder participar en aquesta activitat conjunta amb d'altres ciutats d'Europa i donar suport als afectats pel conflicte a Ucraïna. Les escoles de la Fundació Collserola som espais de convivència on el respecte a la diversitat forma part del nostre ideari. Eduquem el nostre alumnat amb una mirada oberta a un món global i divers i sempre des del respecte a totes les realitats. La mirada del professorat, de les famílies i de tot l'alumnat de les nostres escoles ens acompanya avui per encendre el far simbòlic des de la ciutat de Barcelona. Avui tots estem amb Ucraïna.
Вітання з Барселони. Це Маяк України. Що для нас значить Маяк Україна? Це можливість зустрітися з нашими співвітчизниками, які були змушені залишити свої домівки і потребують зараз допомоги місцевих українців. Що я можу сказати іншим містам? Тим містам, які вже беруть участь, так тримати, тим, що ще поки що не почали цього робити, приєднуйтесь. Ми з Барселони і ми з України.
Hello, I'm James, and I'm a Londoner, and I'm standing outside the Imperial War Museum in the heart of London. I hope in future, in this building behind me, it'll tell the story of how London and Britain stood with Ukraine to defend things that are important to all of us in the hour of our greatest need. So Lighthouse matters because it's a beacon replicating across Europe and perhaps the world about the values that we stand for and the things we hold dear, the very essence of life. London, we stand with you, Ukraine.
Привіт з Лондона! Мене звати Каріна, і я закінчую магістратуру за спеціальністю менеджмент в Imperial College Business школі. Мільйони невинних українців вже постраждали під час війни і потребують допомоги зараз. Lighthouse Україна – це міжнародний захід,
який підтримує українських біженців та об'єднує країни з усього світу, аби загальними зусиллями допомогти Україні. Ми – Лондон, і ми солідарні з Україною.
Hello everyone, we are Psychologists of the World for Ukraine, a community of volunteer specialists from around the world.
We came together because we understand how important it is to provide early help to Ukrainians coming out of the war zone.
We work with deeply traumatized women and children as well as their hosts.
Важливості у скруті ніхто не відчував себе самотнім. Гуртуємося, в єдності сила добра і миру.
I'm from Israel, where people suffer greatly from wars, from violence, from injustice, from pain. So we know how it is, and we are eager to help all the other people who also suffer.
Participation in the international action Lighthouse Ukraine is an opportunity for us to bring our personal and professional energy into this effort.
Вітаємо всіх з самого центру України, Дніпропетровщини. Щиро раді підтримати світло маяка тут, на межі з самою темрявою. Повагою і вдячністю до всього світу. Ми – психологи світу. Ми – солідарні з Україною. Україна переможе.
Доброго вечора, я з Оксфорду. Підтримуйте Україну, тому що майбутнє України – це майбутнє усієї Європи. На стороні українців правда, справедливість і мир. Тому зараз, як ніколи, українцям важлива підтримка всіх європейських міст. Дякую за підтримку і слава Україні!
Hello from Oxford. Please continue to support Ukraine because every European city's efforts makes a difference. Thank you for your unwavering solidarity. We are Oxford and we stand with Ukraine.
Serdecznie pozdrawiamy z Gdyni, która od pierwszych chwil wojny gości licznych uchodźców. Mamy nadzieję, że ta przymusowa gościna będzie miła. Robimy wszystko, aby nasi goście czuli się tutaj jak we własnym domu, a także aby mogli zajmować się tym, czym zajmują się w swoim domu, w swoim kraju. Pracą, nauką, zabawą, dobrym spędzaniem czasu. Wierzę, że dzisiejsze wydarzenie pokazuje jedność między miastami Europy i wierzę, że ta jedność pomoże zwyciężyć nie tylko Ukrainie, ale wszystkim wartościom demokratycznej Europy. Wierzę również, że ona nie minie, kiedy Ukraina już zwycięży i że dzięki temu odbudujemy to piękne państwo, a później wspólnie połączymy się w europejskiej wspólnocie.
Вітаю в Гдині. Бажаю нашій ненькій Україні мирного неба над головою, щирого до щирого здоров'я і закінчення війни.
We are Bas and Xenia. We are from the Netherlands for Ukraine Foundation in Amsterdam. Greeting to all our fellow cities. Let's definitely quickly stop this ridiculous war and free people from Ukraine, helping the refugees locally and in Europe. Xenia?
У українців, у простих українців немає діалогу з війною. Вони не можуть попросити ворога не бомбити свої міста, доки вони не евакуювалися, чи не відбирати їжу у своїх дітей, тому що вони голодні. Але вони можуть і вони просять про допомогу у сусідів, україн-сусідів та у нас, українців за кордоном. Тому, рідні українці, єднаємось і давайте допоможемо ненькій Україні.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Hi, my name is John Dillon. I am from America, New Jersey specifically. I wanted to join with this project Lighthouse. This horrible nightmare in Ukraine has galvanized the civilized world, and certainly America is a big part of that. As a concerned American, I'm happy to join my voice with the voices of people around the world condemning this brutal, senseless war and destruction of homes, murdering of innocent civilians. I hope and pray that this nightmare will end soon. It's springtime, a season of rebirth and renewal, and I hope that this nightmare will end soon and that the people of Ukraine will be able to return and rebuild their beautiful homeland. God bless Ukraine. Slava Ukraina.
Доброго ранку. Ми з України.
Студенти Стенфорду на зв'язку.
Сьогодні українці борються проти найбільшого зла у світі. Але ми не одні. Нас багато. Ми усюди. І у нас є могутні друзі.
Ми боремося не лише проти підлого сусіда, але й за свої цінності. за демократію, за людяність, за доброту.
Ми платимо величезну ціну, але це варте того. Ми точно переможемо. Питання лише в тому, скільки ще нам потрібно заплатити. І це залежить від швидкості і рішучості наших дій зараз.
Ми будуємо маяк. Маяк, який закличе українців і їх друзів. Разом ми освітимо темряву і зробимо все, щоб Україна перемогла.
We are Stanford, and we stand with Ukraine.
Hello from San Francisco Bay Area. I'm Dmytro Kushniruk, Consul General of Ukraine in San Francisco. Today, Ukrainians are fighting not only for the freedom of their country. They are fighting for those who share the same values of democracy, humanity, and kindness. They are fighting valiantly, making immense sacrifice. But they need support from international community, governments, business, and ordinary citizens. Lighthouse Ukraine brings all these people together, and I hope that the light that shines here today will spread across the cities and countries, raising support for Ukraine. We are San Francisco, and we stand with Ukraine.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us today here at Imperial College Business School. We hope this session was inspiring, was bringing awareness, was showing solidarity, and was hopefully bringing further action. Let me join Francesco in thanking all of the speakers today. Special thanks for all the kids. They have been truly amazing, and I know they want to have cake. So can I ask one last thing? You all dressed up so beautifully in the Ukrainian colors. Could I please ask for a team picture? Everybody join me here on stage. If that's all right. Kids, please all come here as well. We want to make sure that those flowers, those colors are all coming out. All here. We'll have to see how we fit. I'm really bad with selfies, so would you want me? Rich is taller. He can do the selfie.
Mummy,
all right. Everybody here.
Can we
Off you go. Come on. All the kids in front.
and Unai go to the staff room?
Yeah, off you go. We can go to the staff room. Here, all sit here in the front, sit in the entrance. Come on over here. Our Esma, come on. Rich, can you take the...
Mary's going to be the one
I
in the front. So.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I don't want to be the one. Right, please, your look is so beautiful. It's all good. You can kneel. Is it okay if they kneel? Right. The tall ones to the end. Emily, we need you there. You can take my phone, Mary, if you want to. Yeah? Right. Off you go. Over here. Brilliant. No. You photographer, yeah. He's photographer.